At the age of 75, I increasingly find myself withdrawing from social interactions. I do not harbor any dislike toward them. I have not lost my affection for dialogue or companionship. However, I eventually recognized that not all interactions merit my time investment. Not every relationship has the potential to last. My peace holds greater value than trivial conversations and social obligations. In my youth, I flourished in social environments. I consistently attended events, acknowledged each birthday, and ensured inclusivity among peers. However, a transformation occurs with age. The perception of time varies. Energy is increasingly recognized as a valuable resource. Clarity of perception begins to emerge, identifying genuine concern versus transient engagement, as well as distinguishing moments of joy from those that result in emotional depletion, is essential. What are the reasons for my current avoidance of social interactions? It is not motivated by loneliness or bitterness, rather, it is characterized by the contrary sentiment. The focus is on making informed choices, safeguarding my well-being, and optimizing the remaining time available. If you have experienced similar feelings, you are not alone. This video presents the underlying reasons for this shift and discusses its potential as a beneficial decision. If you appreciate this type of discussion, please like this video, subscribe, and enable notifications to stay updated on new uploads. Let us begin. Rationale 1. Time is perceived as a valuable resource. In youth, it seemed boundless. We allocated our time liberally to unproductive discussions, unenjoyable obligations, and unfulfilling relationships. There exists a continual prospect for future endeavors, presenting further opportunities to engage in actions of significance. However, over time, a change occurs. One begins to perceive time not as an infinite resource but rather as the most valuable asset one possesses. Similar to financial resources, if not allocated judiciously, one may later reflect on their absence with confusion. I previously accepted all requests. A friend required assistance with relocation. I was present. An acquaintance extended an invitation to an event in which I had little interest. I arrived. The conversation persisted despite my fatigue. I compelled myself to maintain engagement. The matter extended beyond mere politeness. I believed that my availability contributed to my identity as a good person, friend, and family member. However, I failed to recognize that I was allocating my time to activities that lacked significant value in my life. Subsequently, I experienced a realization. I experienced fatigue. The fatigue was not physical, but rather a mental state. I had been occupying my time rather than utilizing it effectively. I was not directing the allocation of my energy. I allowed others to make decisions on my behalf. I contemplated whether this is how I would choose to spend my remaining years. The response was negative. I ceased my actions. I ceased to acquiesce to commitments that deplete my energy. I ceased maintaining relationships that appeared obligatory. I ceased participating in gatherings due to a sense of obligation rather than genuine enjoyment. An extraordinary event occurred. I began to experience a sense of lightness. My days became more tranquil rather than more hectic. The individuals with whom I engaged became increasingly significant. My previously dispersed energy now concentrates on what is truly significant. Have you ever experienced that sensation? The awareness of the passage of time and the desire to utilize it effectively is significant. If applicable, consider this a reminder. One can always assume control. Regardless of timing, one's time is a personal resource, not obligated to others. Utilize resources judiciously. Relationships evolve. At one point, I held the belief that an increase in relationships would enhance the richness of my life. I believed it was necessary to sustain all connections, despite their draining effect on me. Upon reflection, I recognized that certain individuals appeared solely in times of need, that numerous discussions centered exclusively on their issues, and that particular relationships resulted in fatigue rather than fulfillment. In youth, individuals often acquiesce to unreciprocated relationships. We endure numerous complaints, accept indifference, or maintain connections well beyond their viability. At a particular stage in life, one begins to experience the burden of existence. It is observed that certain individuals tend to seek assistance exclusively during their times of need, while they are absent when others require support. Certain relationships, regardless of the effort invested, often fail to yield genuine care or reciprocity. At one point, I recognized that I lacked the energy to continue in that manner. I acquired the ability to decline activities that are detrimental to my well-being. Ending a relationship is a challenging process. I recall a friend with whom I was once very close, however. As time progressed, our discussions became exclusively focused on her frustrations, struggles, and disappointments. She never inquired about my well-being, nor did she demonstrate genuine concern for my feelings. My decision to step away was not driven by resentment but by the recognition that I warranted a more favorable situation. Interestingly, upon departing, I did not experience a sense of emptiness. I experienced a sense of lightness. Not all individuals warrant your time and energy. One is not required to maintain relationships solely due to historical ties. Establishing boundaries leads to an enhanced sense of autonomy and tranquility. It is advisable to disengage from relationships that are emotionally draining. Making choices that prioritize one's well-being is not an act of selfishness, rather. It reflects a commitment to self-respect. 3. Establish boundaries to prevent engagement in detrimental relationships. At a certain point in life, one may come to understand that not all relationships merit preservation. Younger individuals often exhibit greater tolerance, excuse negative behavior, extend forgiveness readily, and rationalize that certain individuals merit unlimited opportunities for redemption. As individuals age, their tolerance for negativity, drama, and unbalanced relationships diminishes. One begins to perceive reality more clearly and recognizes that safeguarding one's peace is significantly more crucial than sustaining relationships that are detrimental. I previously experienced guilt regarding the establishment of boundaries. If assistance is required, I would prioritize providing support above all else. If a friend contacted me solely during their times of difficulty, I would dedicate considerable time to listening, regardless of whether they inquired about my well-being. If a family member exhibited manipulative behavior, I would tolerate it, as that is their inherent disposition. Allowing toxic relationships to persist is not an act of kindness, rather. It constitutes self-neglect. On a particular day, I reached a decision. I ceased responding to calls from an individual who consistently contacted me to express grievances. I ceased allocating time for an individual who consistently failed to support me during my moments of need. I ceased to feel accountable for assisting individuals who were unwilling to change. A surprising event occurred. I experienced a sense of lightness. A lack of dramatic confrontation, argument, or bitterness characterized the moment, leading to a quiet realization that I had ceased to invest in unreciprocated efforts. Releasing toxic relationships is not driven by feelings of anger or a desire for revenge. The concept pertains to self-respect. It is essential to acknowledge the value of your time and energy and to surround yourself with individuals who enhance your well-being rather than deplete it. It does not imply terminating relationships at the initial indication of discord, rather. It involves acknowledging when a relationship is more detrimental than beneficial, experiencing exhaustion following interactions, feeling stress instead of joy in someone's presence, and observing a one-sided dynamic where one party consistently takes without reciprocating are indicators that it may be appropriate to disengage. Walking away does not indicate selfishness, rather. It reflects wisdom. At this point in my life, I no longer feel compelled to justify my boundaries. I am not obligated to provide justification for prioritizing my well-being. You do not either. Individuals who genuinely care for you will honor your boundaries. Who doesn't respect your boundaries? It is possible that their presence in your life was not intended from the outset. 4. Today, the world appears altered. In moments of quiet observation, I perceive a significant departure from the familiar reality I once understood. I do not reject modernity, however. There exists an implicit melancholy in acknowledging that the world has fundamentally changed. I long for the era when individuals engaged in meaningful eye contact during conversations and handwritten correspondence conveyed genuine emotions. In contrast to the impersonal nature of swiftly typed digital messages, I long for a time when conversations were not disrupted by incessant notifications and when an individual's presence held greater significance than merely being a name on a digital friends list. The younger generation is raised in an environment where smartphones, social media, and artificial intelligence are inherent, contrasting with my experience of having to learn to navigate these technologies. Individuals can engage in video calls with people located globally, however. They often find it challenging to have meaningful conversations with their parents or grandparents who reside in the same household. I attempted to maintain pace. I utilized social media to maintain connections, however. It became evident that, despite having numerous acquaintances, genuine and meaningful conversations were increasingly infrequent. While it's easy to show approval with likes or emojis, how often people truly ask about each other's well-being is debatable. I acknowledge the convenience offered by contemporary society. While technology has undoubtedly facilitated various aspects of life, there is a sense of nostalgia for the past, characterized by closer interpersonal connections and the profound significance of simple experiences. Families convened around the dinner table, with no individuals hurrying to check their phones or engaging in scrolling during the meal. I remember children playing outside instead of focusing on electronic devices. It is noteworthy that there was a time when individuals prioritized interpersonal connections over the incessant rush and distractions of modern life, often fixating on matters whose significance they did not fully comprehend. I have come to accept that the world is in a constant state of change. Irrespective of my preferences, I prefer to value what retains significance rather than lamenting what has been lost. I continue to derive pleasure from authentic conversations. Despite their infrequency, I value tranquil mornings with a cup of tea, free from notifications and the distractions of the digital world. I've learned to slow down and resist succumbing to a lifestyle rhythm that no longer suits me. I may no longer fit into this world as I once did. Yet I am determined to maintain my inner peace. It is unnecessary to pursue every emerging trend to demonstrate that one is not falling behind. I opt to live authentically, with simplicity, purpose, and a genuine sense of contentment that is independent of external influences. 5. Experiencing solitude does not equate to feelings of loneliness. I previously experienced a fear of silence. The silence of the house, coupled with the absence of invitations or communication from others, induced a sense of unease. I previously believed that the absence of gatherings, engaging conversations, or future plans would lead to a gradual diminishment of life's significance. However, I eventually realized that my fear did not stem from loneliness. It originated from how I perceived solitude. I remember taking an evening stroll in the park. Previously, I consistently accompanied someone, whether a friend or a family member, ensuring the presence of a companion for dialogue and the exchange of thoughts. On that day, I walked alone. Initially, I experienced a sense of discomfort, as though an element was absent. Observations of individuals in my vicinity revealed elderly couples engaged in cheerful conversation, young couples strolling hand in hand, and children playing freely. For a brief moment, I questioned whether I had truly become this isolated. Subsequently, I seated myself on a bench and engaged in observation. The leaves rustle in the breeze. The evening sunlight reflects on the lake, and birds chirp as they move between branches. I observed all details. For the first time in an extended period, I was entirely present, devoid of distraction. Although no one engaged with me, I no longer experienced a sense of disorientation. A tranquil state emerged, revealing that solitude does not equate to loneliness. Subsequently, I gradually altered my perspective on solitude. Previously, I consistently sought to occupy empty time with meetups, superfluous phone calls, and various plans to create a sense of busyness. However, I now recognize that there is no issue with dedicating time to self-reflection. I have come to appreciate leisurely mornings with a warm cup of tea, tranquil afternoons spent reading without interruption, and solitary moments listening to an old song without the necessity of companionship. Solitude is less daunting than I previously perceived. It does not constitute isolation. This presents an opportunity for self-reflection and enhanced self-understanding. I have come to understand that peace is not derived from boisterous laughter or incessant activity. It arises from internal contentment. I no longer experience apprehension toward silence, nor do I dread days devoid of phone calls or invitations. I value moments of solitude. recognizing that happiness is not contingent upon the presence of others. If you have experienced discomfort in solitude, I would like to convey the following. Consider reinterpreting silence. Avoid hastily occupying every vacant moment with trivial activities. Allow yourself the opportunity to engage in activities you enjoy, such as walking, reading, or sitting quietly with a cup of tea. Permit yourself to accept the tranquility that is rightfully yours. Solitude should not be regarded with apprehension. It constitutes a benefit, provided one acquires the ability to appreciate it. What are the reasons for my avoidance of numerous individuals? I had a friend with whom I shared many years of my life. In our youth, we engaged in discussions encompassing both our minor pleasures and our profound grievances. I believed that this friendship would endure indefinitely. However, over time, I began to observe a notable change. Our discussions became increasingly brief, lacking genuine interest and instead focusing on complaints about life, grievances, or superficial small talk. With each encounter, I no longer departed with the same sense of happiness as I previously experienced. I felt depleted, as though I was struggling to maintain a grasp on something that no longer seemed complete. I came to the realization that I was consistently the initiator of communication. In the absence of communication, silence prevailed. I ceased my efforts. I allowed events to progress organically. And as anticipated, the silence persisted. At that moment, I realized that certain relationships persist solely due to one individual's attachment, while the other has already disengaged. I engaged in extensive reflection, contemplating the possibility of being overly critical and considering any personal changes I may have undergone. However, I subsequently understood that it was not a matter of becoming distant. The focus was on enhancing self-worth. At this point in my life, I lack the energy to sustain relationships that are draining and engage in conversations that yield only negativity. I wish to dedicate my remaining years to individuals who genuinely care. To those with whom understanding comes naturally. Disengaging from a friendship that was previously significant is a challenging endeavor. However, at times, relinquishing control does not equate to a loss. It involves allowing oneself the opportunity to attain tranquility. I previously experienced guilt regarding distancing myself from individuals who no longer shared my values, however. I now recognize this as a natural aspect of life. It is acceptable that not all individuals are intended to accompany us throughout our entire journey. Individuals experiencing dissatisfaction in a relationship should recognize that there is no requirement to maintain connections with those who do not reciprocate their emotional investment. Engage with individuals who recognize your worth and facilitate an authentic expression of your identity. Select tranquility for your well-being, as it is warranted. Have you ever questioned whether you are the sole individual experiencing this sentiment? I previously held a similar belief. Upon distancing myself from noisy gatherings and prioritizing tranquility over superficial relationships, I began to wonder if others were experiencing similar transitions. Upon further observation and attentive listening, I came to the realization that I was not alone. I have encountered peers who were previously the center of attention but now value their moments of solitude. Some women dedicate their lives to pleasing others, ultimately deciding to prioritize their needs. People no longer feel the need to maintain relationships that have reached their end. Nor do they feel guilty when setting boundaries. If you've felt this way, know that you're not alone. This should not be interpreted as isolation, rather. It signifies growth and an understanding of the true sources of happiness. This choice may not be comprehensible to all, yet individuals who genuinely care will acknowledge and respect it. Have you ever encountered this shift? Please share your insights, as your narrative may resonate with someone in need of encouragement. I previously misunderstood a particular concept. I perceived old age as a culmination, a gradual passage through days characterized by reminiscence. However, I subsequently recognized that this does not constitute the conclusion of the narrative. This marks a new phase in which I prioritize my needs and desires, free from the pursuit of others' approval or societal expectations. Reaching the age of 70 and beyond does not signify an impending end, rather. It indicates that, for the first time, time is genuinely at your disposal. Cease the urgency and prioritize your own needs over those of others. Mornings can be enjoyed according to personal preference. and days can be spent engaging in activities that provide genuine satisfaction. A warm cup of tea, a good book, and a small garden filled with flowers represent simple elements that contribute significantly to overall happiness. One may wonder if she is becoming reclusive and distancing herself from social interactions. This is not the case. I continue to appreciate life and engage in conversations, but exclusively with individuals who contribute warmth and tranquility to my environment. This stage has led me to understand that an increase in social presence does not inherently enhance the quality of life. Indeed, relinquishing certain relationships can contribute to a sense of emotional relief. Reduced noise, diminished drama, and lowered pressure allow for increased time to appreciate what is genuinely significant. If this video was impactful, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing your insights in the comments section. I welcome your response. Have you experienced this sensation? Provide an overview, maintaining a tone that is engaging and positive.